You're listening to Dead Air Podcast, part of splatterpictures.net.
What's up, everybody? Wes, Dead Air Knipe here with always
typical Lydia.
Today's show, we're going to be doing the 1981 cult classic, Nightmares. You're listening to relaxing music on Daytona 95.
Love 99.9, which is interesting because the wife is reading a book called Love when they have that radio broadcaster come on. And it's really a love story, isn't it, Wes? It really, truly is.
It's a love story for pranks. Somebody likes pranks a lot. Let me ask you this. Do you know pranksters? Do you know any pranksters? Have you ever known a prankster?
My father is a prankster, and instead of regaling everyone with all of the tales of all the great pranks he pulled, and he was a machinist in a machine shop, and apparently machinists are the world's pranksters. If you didn't know, now you know. Go into a metal shop on the midnight shift and they are pulling pranks left and right like it's Porky's or something. It's most ridiculous. And of all the pranks he ever pulled, the best prank I think he ever pulled was taking slices of cheese and emptying a cayenne pepper tablet that is probably about, 75 billion Scoville units of heat into the middle of a piece of cheese and then sealing it with another piece of cheese on top and then feeding it to his brother.
You know, that's fucking hysterical because my mother has a famous story in which her older sister pranked her into eating chocolate laxatives and said that it was a candy bar. And my mother ate a bar of laxatives and she got incredibly sick and my aunt got in a whole lot of trouble. I don't like pranks. I don't like people who pull pranks. No. I'm very gullible.
I'm there with you.
And when people say something to me, I just believe them. I'm like, oh, okay. Hey, Wes, go get the banana bender. That's a classic produce prank, by the way. Or go get the keys to the parking lot. That's another, if you've worked retail and someone's asked you to go get the keys to the parking lot, that's another prank. And I'm just like, oh, okay. And then they all just laugh at you because you're new. And I just was trying to do what I was told. I thought that's what my job was. But this kid likes pranks. There's another prankster horror movie where the kid is very into pranks. Trick or treat, not...
Yes.
Or trick and that kid is ruthless in how much he likes to perform pranks. But this is not as a prank oriented movie as you might think. This is a West pick.
It absolutely is, and this kid reminded me a lot of that trick or treat kid, or trick. It's easily confused with that really cool Trick or Treat film.
Yeah, we're not talking about Little Sam and his pumpkin lolly. We're talking about a curly-haired kid that's the worst in a movie that's not very interesting. Just tossing that out there.
It's really not. And Satan's Little Helper is a great movie that has the similar sort of kid, not exactly big on the pranks, but he's really stoked when other people pull pranks on one another, and he assumes everything is a prank, which is great. When you were saying that you were gullible, I had a good friend of mine who it's the same. She trusted people, especially people she cared about, right? So, and that's part of my problem with pranksters is that it's not funny, especially if it's something that is like, oh, you've tricked me by putting salt in the sugar and now I've ruined my coffee. Great. Now I get to make another coffee. Thanks, asshole. But her husband was always tricking her with things and pranking her and stuff. And he said something to the effect of, it's because it's funny to see you react. And she said, no, you just think it's funny because I'm gullible. And he said, I don't think you know what gullible means. And she said, of course I know what gullible means. I'm fucking gullible. And he said, no, I think you're using it wrong. You should go look it up in a dictionary. And so she did.
That's classic. There's something to be said, Lydia, for an aesthetic of a film. And I love me a good old-fashioned New York aesthetic. Although, spoiler alert, a lot of this film doesn't take place in New York. But it sets us up so beautifully, not only getting to that sleaze and small apartments and everything's just a little gross, but we just get a full-on view of exploitation central of 42nd Street, where the Grindhouse cinemas were, where there was a lot of sex work happening. And there's an entire opening sequence that takes place with our dear protagonist. This is a slasher where our killer is the main character.
Which reminds me a lot of 1980s, beginning of the extreme and splatterpunk genres of horror literature, where this sort of point of view was not really used very much in literature. So this reminded me so much of an early splatterpunk, sort of like very much like the 1980s book The Slob, very much like Jack Ketchum's work, very much like very early Layman, same sort of era too. So I was really pleased to see this particular level of nasty in a video nasty, because like, a lot of video nasties have a couple shots that they're, famously banned for or whatever, or refuse to edit around. And it's usually not just a complete onslaught from beginning to end of very super gory effects. This is now the movie that if somebody says, take me to your video nasty, I would take them to this, because this really sums it up a lot better than a lot of the others. It doesn't really hit the whole New York grime quite as well as some that stay within the city, but it does have that beautiful shot like you're talking about that just follows him down the road past peep show after sex shop after peep show after sex shop, and it's really a really wonderful scene within that film. But gory, right from the beginning, we're greeted with some fantastic gore.
Which is really cool. And I want to say that the first time that I ever saw this film, I saw a really grainy, crappy transfer on YouTube, super compressed. This was very many years ago. And yeah, and I bet if you gave me a couple of minutes, I could probably find the original video that I would have watched. But that whole pre-title sequence was not in that sequence. And I never got to see that sequence until I bought the Severin Blu-ray, which looks beautiful, by the way. They really did a nice job of cleaning up this movie and making it look pretty fresh. There's obviously going to be some wear on some of the scenes here and there, but for the most part, I was really, really pleased with the level of quality that I got. The gore in this film is great, and we have a twofer in terms of what this movie is trying to do. One, kick in the nuts a little bit. They want you to know the level of violence that you are going to be getting with this sequence. Two, we're going to have a lot of dream sequences. We're going to have a lot of hallucinations. This is an unreliable narrator. This person has schizophrenia, delusions of grandeur. They'll tell us with a HAL 9000 like computer about, which is, I'm sure, like what psychologists do, Lydia, if you didn't know this. They stand around a CRT television that has a bunch of like prompts, and they just, the letters and the words just go up to let you know exactly what's wrong with this guy and their experimental drugs that can help him. But fuck all that, Lydia. Fuck it all to hell. What is this movie even about anyways.
This movie is about all the cool pranks that you can pull, especially when you're one of those kids in a horror movie that seems to have a whole lot of disposable income and can get complete outfits for Halloween of what appears to be Commander Zod. I'm not really sure who it is that he's trying to be, but like he has all this money and time and can just play pranks. It's about pranks. And it's about maybe he is the son of the ultimate prankster. Maybe this is all just one giant prank.
It could be about nothing but pranks. And in fact, the level of hysteria around the pranks would really make you wonder how this kid just grins through the whole thing and how intolerant everyone is. Meanwhile, he's got like some hippy dippy wannabe father around him. Like, let me just like get really to the heart of all this. I'll be the sensitive dad you never had.
Let's talk about our feelings. Would you count prank phone calls as pranks? Is that, because there's some adults pulling pranks, if that's the case, throughout this entire movie. And I mean, I'm not kidding when I say the whole movie's about pranks, if you take that to its serious conclusion of the fact that this guy has pulled the prank of let's escape from the mental hospital. That's a prank.
This film focuses a lot on our protagonist, who is the killer, George Tatum. If you're interested in the film world of introspective killer movies like this, I highly recommend things like 1983's Angst, the German film that inspired another wonderful film that does this just as well, Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. This film also is going to do that to a lesser extent. And the one thing that I'll say negatively about Nightmare is the moments of introspection. I just wish they pulled the taffy on them a little bit more, because that's when this film gets really good. I appreciate him waking up from nightmares. I appreciate him feeling his dark passenger taking over. I appreciate him talking to his psychologist, even though I really wish the people who wrote these psychologist characters read a book or two about psychology, because they just seem so out of their fucking elements for people who are supposed to be on the bleeding edge of treatment for people with this type of mental illness. A lot of it is said with little dialogue, whereas in films like Angst, there's so much inner monologue that really, really tells you what that character is thinking and the sort of mania that he is contending with and what he is trying to accomplish. But I'm not going to focus too much on other films. I really want to focus in on this one. And George Tatum is a guy who, we've seen this in a lot of horror movies, guys who are enraged by women and sex, and somebody who, alternatively to what a lot of killers are in films like this, wanting to be better, not wanting to do this. And there is some great sequences towards the end of the film where I'm really, really into it. But we got ourselves a bit of a flashback / dream sequence. It's giving a bit of Pieces. It's giving a bit of Sleepaway Camp. We got some naughty fixations on a bed. And what I like so much about this scene is that it's an epicenter of probably one of the most talked about points of this film that has nothing to do with the movie. And I think it'd be weird if we didn't talk about the controversy surrounding this film.
Very much so. Now, you will notice in the credits of this film, I watched it on YouTube as well, but not the grainy, crummy version. I rented it from YouTube, and I think that they've just got the Severin transfer because it looks extremely good. And in those credits, I had known about the controversy that Tom Savini reportedly did the effects on this film. And then Tom Savini reportedly did not do the effects on this film, because he says himself he did not do the effects on this film. He didn't work on this film. And he flat out denied ever having any involvement, and he actually hates the movie. Okay. But then there's photographs of him on set. There's admission that he did direct some of these effects, that he was a consultant. And right up there, red text on black background, special effects supervisor Tom Savini. And it's like, okay, a supervisor doesn't just like put in a phone call or write a fucking snail mail to supervise effects. They're on set. They do things. They help. They direct the effects. That's what a special effects supervisor does. And he's credited with that. So I had understood that it was a rumor that he had been on there. I didn't know his name was up there in the bold text in the beginning of the credits. It's on Internet Movie Database. There's been many, many interesting interviews about the fact that he was there / was not there. He denies being there. People saw him there. The director will attest to the fact that he participated in a lot of these effects, and he says he did not. So it's just fantastic to me.
So before I had seen one clip from this film, the first thing I ever learned about was the controversy around this film. And I learned it from this book that I have. Now, listeners, you can't see it, but it's called Dark Visions, and it was written by Stanley Waiter. This is a fascinating book. If you could ever find one, it's, unfortunately, it's out of print. It's very old. It contains a lot of interviews from a lot of people in horror. This book was released in 1992, and it includes an interview with Tom Savini in which he very briefly discusses and flat out denies his involvement in Nightmares by saying that they tried to cash in on his name recognition. To our non-horror listeners out there who maybe are just dabbling in the genre, Tom Savini is an extremely famous special effects makeup artist. Dawn of the Dead, Friday the 13th, The Burning, The Prowler, Bill Lustig's Maniac, the list goes on, of some of the greatest horror special effects in particularly slasher films, zombie films, etc. like that. One of the things that I like is he teased his directorial debut in this book. And he couldn't tell us what the movie was, but it was a remake, and we now know, living in the year 2024, that it was indeed the Night of the Living Dead remake, a very good remake. Then, at some point, in between interviews like this being released, photos surfaced of him literally on the set. And if you look at the photos, there he is swinging an axe, showing the young actor how to do it properly. The Severin Blu-ray has an interview with Tom Savini in which he simultaneously admits that he was there, admits that he participated in scenes, admitted that he worked on things and consulted on things, but at the same time says that Les Lorraine did all of the special effects. And the reason why is absolutely insane. It sounds, this is what it is. I'm just going to say what it is. He says that while on the set, he was there doing all the stuff that I just said that he was doing. But the reason why he thinks he wasn't there, and that's his words, not mine, the reason why he thinks he wasn't actually there is because in one sequence in the bed, basically one of the more centerpieces around the special effects in this film, this bed sequence happens again and again throughout the narrative. Because blood is hitting white bed sheets and white clothing, he would have known to put green in the blood so that the color wouldn't run and it would still stay a vibrant red. And because that didn't happen, he wasn't there, because he would have known to do that. But yet he was there. So I don't know what the hell this is. I don't know if this is just a really good example of memories failing, or if he's just... What do you think? What do you think?
What I think is what cracks this wide open, and this is where Steven Spielberg and Tobe Hooper, do you think that they look alike? Because there's been a similar thing about people being on set and people being credited with things they didn't or did not do or maybe did do. Do you think that Tobe Hooper and Steven Spielberg looked alike?
Well, for the time, and if I'm going back in my memory about what Steven Spielberg and both Tobe Hooper would have looked like in the late 70s, early 80s. Shaggy mop top, facial hair. Tobe Hooper had a mustache, I believe. So yeah, like fairly skinny, shaggy. They look like Muppets.
They look like Muppets. And it's better to rely on our unreliable memory because memory is not the best thing. Eyewitness reports are false half of the time or just remembered incorrectly or too easily influenced. Very easily influenced. Too easily influenced. And there is an actor in this film that bears a similar, very vaguely similar look to Tom Savini. Mick Cribben playing Bob Roslin, the hippie boyfriend. He looks quite a bit like Tom Savini. He would have been on set a lot more. So maybe Tom Savini was there that one day, the one day that he would recall he was there. But I betcha that there's people that looked around and thought they saw Tom Savini on set way more often than he really was. So he probably did do the things, like help somebody, show them how to swing an axe for them because they couldn't do it properly. He probably oversaw what is absolutely a Tom Savini effect of using the toothpicks. So he talks about the toothpicks in Friday the 13th 2 all of the time, how they did the head chopping off scene. They basically did that there. It's the exact same effect. You can see the toothpicks. You can see the hands coming up. It's the exact same effect. So, he should be suing them if he didn't do it because that's his fucking effect. But yeah, then I saw this scene. There's a bar scene with many people. And if I could do like Exhibit A, I would have that we would pan through that shot, that panning shot where it shows all the different people in the bar. And I would just be circling all the Tom Savinis, just a whole bunch of Tom Savinis everywhere. There's about 20 fucking dudes on this set that look exactly like Tom Savini, especially from a distance. So, especially in hindsight, especially even 10 minutes later, because you're probably stoned on the marijuana and can't remember stuff properly, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I if you recall the scene I'm talking about, if not, go and watch it and you will see. Yeah, there's probably at least 10 dudes walking around on set that look a lot like Tom Savini. Am I wrong?
You're not. And in fact, watching the film just before we started rolling, I had a moment where I had looked down and then I had looked up and that sequence was going on. And I thought, oh, wait, did Tom Savini do a cameo in this? Was he on set at least for that? Because I knew already that he was on set. Whatever the situation is, this is probably the thing that's discussed the most surrounding this film that not a lot of people have seen.
Unfortunately, when you go to look up any think pieces or scholarly articles about this film, that is mostly what you run into is people talking about this. Like they don't even talk much about it being a video nasty. They'll talk about it in the Tom Savini controversy way, or if you're trying to look up things on films, they're talking about Nightmare on Elm Street, because that definitely title-wise would have overshadowed this. Even when you're searching for it, there's a million things with Nightmare in the title. And this movie just doesn't make the cut, so to speak. And it's weird why. It had different titles, Nightmare in a Damaged Brain, and I wish it would have stuck with that longer, admittedly, but way more intriguing title, or Nightmares of a Damaged Brain. I don't know if one is wrong, but Nightmare in a Damaged Brain, I think, is the one that they used in the UK, if not Nightmares of a Damaged Brain. Either one I would have preferred a lot better.
Yes, unfortunately, it suffers from just getting buried with a fairly generic title. So generic, in fact, that there was a point I didn't do it because I figured you would be able to figure out, but I had several thoughts. Because there's another film that's just called Nightmares, and it's a UK film. It's quite different. And then I thought, oh, I sure hope Lydia watches the right Nightmare. And then I thought, what would be funny if you watch the wrong one. And then we just did like this is what the movie I watched that called Nightmare was, and you could do yours. So I thought, no matter what, we'll be able to salvage the show and it'd be funny. But this is exactly the type of problem. Not only is this coming out in 1983, where we are in full swing of some of the most influential and visible slashers of all time in that golden era, that sweet spot of the greatest slashers ever made, or some of the greatest slashers ever made. It's a title that is just not eye-catching enough to make you remember this film. And this happens again and again, even with the film that we're doing next. It could be about anything. You know what one of the elements is at the very least, but what the movie's actually about would be anybody's guess. Nightmare also could be anybody's guess. And there's already one of the most famous horror movies ever made with the word nightmare in it. And so like your analytics, your Google is just going to swallow your movie up unless you make sure that you're putting in the name and the year it came out, and you know what the poster looks like.
Yeah, the poster's really iconic. I love the look of that poster in its art style, and it would set it apart if it was as memorable. I'd never seen it before you recommended this film, and I feel odd. It's like it was lost in a time warp where I didn't exist or something, because I'm surprised I'd never heard of this film before. So I'm really glad, because it's right up there with Pieces, which also has some very interesting art. Like, it came out around the same time, same sort of level of gore going on. It's not quite as compelling as Pieces, because Pieces has a lot more camp to it. This is not campy, even though it could be taken as such because of the young CJ. CJ, funnily enough, is a funny name in this household, because that was the name of our dog before Chris got it. And it's just a joke. Like, once in a while we want to offend our dog, I suppose. We call him by his dead name, CJ. And so this kid, CJ, the prankster, a lot of the stuff he does would come across as that and kind of hokey, but they don't play it up, because, of course, this is an Italian filmmaker. He's not going to have that hokey sort of midnight Moonlight Massacre kind of hokey police music that they play. Or he's not going to play jungle intrigue when people are running or anything like that. He's not going to pull those really awkward American filmmaker things. He's a dyed-in-the-wool Italian filmmaker. So we have an amazing score, really good music, very good music choices, nothing campy about it. Everything drives the psychological plot forward. Even the ridiculous antics of this young boy, CJ, even the very strange, weepy-voiced prank calls that the killer is making, and even the CJ kid, because they both tend to make prank calls. And it reminds me a lot of what was going on with the East Area Rapist phone calls. And I wouldn't hesitate to say, while I'm hesitating to say, that they drew a lot on the Son of Sam killings, which terrorized New York at the time. And this would probably be what the successor, like if the Son of Sam was never caught, would he have gone on to do something like this, perhaps? Although he was never married. Other killers, though, you could like project that left unchecked or escaping from prison, would they go on a cross-country rampage? I mean, it was a few years before Ted Bundy went on his, but, not dissimilar.
Do you remember that who was the killer that wrote, like, stop me before I kill again, or for the love of God, stop me before I kill again? He wrote it in blood on the walls. Fuck, I can't remember his name.
It might have been one of the Hillside Stranglers. If it wasn't Son of Sam, because he wanted to be caught as well and stopped, it might have been him in a letter. It was funny, before we started recording, you said something about let's start fiddling and farting around. And if you're a Zodiac killer follower, that's one of the things he said, fiddle and fart around. And just recently, people were like, let's get into the etymology of this saying, and maybe we can help, pinpoint, well, it's yet another clue in helping them to narrow down the search as to who the Zodiac was. And I was like, it's Wes, because because you just said fiddle and fart around. No one says that except the Zodiac Killer.
Oh no, you've cracked my fiddling and farting around puzzle, Lydia. It was
Listening to the East Area Rapist phone call, though, like I do, to relax at night.
It's your
It
ASMR.
reminded me. Yeah, exactly. Like, oh my fucking God. The first time I heard that was on a city bus listening to a podcast, and it freaked me out terribly. I couldn't imagine getting that phone call. It was so freaky. But the phone calls in this are not dissimilar. So they do hit a lot of that, like, really, really well. Very, very well. And the really good effects to go along with that. There's some things where this movie sort of falls apart with the almost ad-libbed lines and the performance of the psychologist and the HAL 9000. They had AI and the internet, it seems, because this psychologist does most of his doctoring, like you said, by looking at what appears to be a teleprompter that he can type commands into. And it seems to be hooked up with the New York Police Department and, all of Interpol, perhaps, because he seems to have access to probability. He can run probability scenarios and sort of like data mapping on this goddamn teleprompter somehow magically. It's absurd. It's absolutely absurd, the technological angle of this movie.
You said the word magic, and that is exactly what I love about this weird era of films that include computers, written by people who have not the foggiest idea how computers work. And so consequently, computers are just magical devices that you just put in prompts and it does calculations, and these calculations draw conclusions while a bunch of men in bifocals and puffing on pipes and wearing cardigans just stand around it like, yes, you see. And then all they do, their expert research, is they just sit around some paper that they printed out and read off what it says as if it's like a psychological analysis. I was like, this is not good science. This is not medicine. This is nothing. And to the point in which, like, they really drive home that this is a component in the film that they want you to pay attention to, because they zoom in on that teleprompter multiple times. And to the point in which there's several sequences in this film in which that is what you're looking at. And so they're trying to let you know that this is very important. And then you just have like a bunch of guys, 3 different scientists, just talking about the data that they're reading. And meanwhile, they completely lose track of this guy, George Tatum, and who starts going to the 42nd Street Grindhouse, is having like multiple seizures every time he gets triggered by something. He seems to be both compelled and triggered by sex. We can probably guess why based off of the flashback sequence, because even though they wait to the end of the film to tell you exactly what happened, it's at a very remedial reading level. If you've seen any type of horror movie like this, you're going to get already what happened. And then he's off like a shot, Lydia, to Florida.
To Florida. And, I was watching this and I thought, this is really vague. We know from the summary, the synopsis, that this is an escaped homicidal maniac. And I'm like, they have not quite clearly said that he's escaped. He just seems to be on the run, and they're sitting around their teleprompter talking about how much drugs they're pumping him full of and how he's not a danger to society. He's completely reformed. Meanwhile, we see him at a peep show and losing his fucking shit all over town. And we're like, has he not escaped? Are they aware he's escaped? They haven't mentioned it. And it's not till about 25 minutes or so into the film where they rant at one another about his having escaped.
But I don't get the sense. So when you say an escaped mental patient or an escaped whatever, he escaped. What does that imply? That implies that he at least cracked a window and got out. This is not that. It seems as though he was given leave and he was put in an apartment and was like, okay, like you're an outpatient now. The thing that they're mad about is not that he left the facility. It's that now that he's left the facility, they instantaneously lost him.
Okay. I wish they would have made that a little more clear, because he is, yes, in an apartment from the get-go. That's where we meet him, having his weird dreams. And one thing about these dreams is that not only are they just deliciously gory and full of really wonderful beheadings and stuff, it's really wonderful for the gore hound. And in any other film, I would be so fed up with the repetitious nature of them, because we see the same sort of scenario over and over and over again, but I like it. And I don't know, like, I've seen other films, like you said, if you've seen a film about a guy that has flashbacks to something terrible happening in his youth, it's usually overplayed and spoon-fed. We've seen it a million times, but this one, for some reason, feels fresh. And I'm not sure. Do you have that same feeling, or by the 15th time that you've seen this beheaded woman, are you just like, okay, yeah, we get it?
Here's why I think it works. And I don't know if you'll agree, but it all hinges on that scene on the beach. Because what do we see? No hallucination. And it cuts to him, and he does that same guttural wail. And it tells us that this sequence is happening again and again. Now, even when he's awake, sometimes it's just a dream. Sometimes it's happening before his very waking eyes. And I think the scream, the anguish, I think that is what pulls us back and makes it compelling. I think that if you lost that element, because gang, this is a very convincing, anguished cry. And I think that is what makes it work. If you take that out, then it's repetition, it's bullshit, we're bored of it by the second time we've seen it.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense, because he is really what grounds you between his unreliable narrator nature, the places that he puts himself in that are triggering or not, and the fact that he's seeing this, yes, while waking, can't stop them, wants to stop them, calls his doctor in a panic, even though he's still on the lam, so to speak, and he's, given over to his compulsions 100%, and it's painful, and we can tell it's painful. So that keeps us really, really rooted in this. I wish that they could have cut a lot of the CJ angle of this film out and have something really spectacular on their hands, very dark.
That's what I'm saying. Like it's almost there. And when I'm seeing the sequences with George, there's a good movie happening here where I'm very dialed in, and it's dark, and it's exploring how awful this must be to live this way. Like, what a sad, horrible life. And yes, this person is dangerous, but it's so pitiful. It's like you really feel for this character, and he's acting his ass off. He's doing a great job in this. Now, let's cut to the sequence in which the elements that are introduced into the Florida sequences they just make you want to go back to George all that much more. And that is the introduction of Susan and her family. Now, Susan is a single mother of 3 kids, and they're very rambunctious children. And she is both trying to have a life of her own. She's got this boyfriend. She relies heavily on a babysitter named Kathy. And she has very typical pixie sticked up hooligan children that are just constantly shouting over each other. And CJ is trouble enough, but just because CJ is the one causing pranks, it's not necessarily the most annoying aspect of the scenes with these children. It's also his sisters. And sometimes I'm just like, why are we all shouting? I grew up in a house of 3. I don't remember as like, my burger, give me my burger, give me my burger. I don't remember ever acting like that at all. So what is the reference to this?
Children of the Indigo children, sort of 70s progressive parenting, perhaps the very Dr. Spock level of parenting, which we weren't. I'm a little older, but same thing. We would have acted like that. We would have gotten backhanded, probably in the worst case scenario. More generally, we would have been sent to our room or told, "What is wrong with you? Settle down. Oh my God, here's your burger. Can it, kid? Jeez." At the very least, these kids don't get that. They get allowed to be unhinged all that they want until their mom loses her shit entirely on them, which is no way to parent. Granted, she's doing this all alone and all that stuff, which I think in 1981 was a little more rare, and people didn't know how to cope as a single parent. And the idea that they were supposed to be these free, loving spirits that let their kids adapt and grow and turn into little adults all on their own, free-range children, so to speak, and let them expand their little horizons all on their own in the world and be who they are and let their personalities sing through. On one hand, and on the other hand, they were single parents in trauma and didn't know how to handle themselves or others, let alone these free-range children. So I think that's where that stems from, because I don't know any kids that behave like that. Those sort of kids would get weird looks, and those are the sort of kids where my parents would probably like keep us away from and be like, okay, we're not going to go play over there anymore because everyone's an insane monkey.
Susan's boyfriend very much seems to be embodying that Dr. Spock gentle hand. Hey, buddy, don't you worry, don't you fret. There is a sequence in this film. The first big prank that we get from CJ is we think that he's been stabbed. Now, there is an element to this in which Susan laments the fact that she hates the house that she has. Her husband walked out on them right when CJ was born. She's been on her own. Nobody cares. And she's stressed out. I don't know what she's stressed out about. She seems to be, pardon my observation, she seems to be stressed out about the fact that she wants to not be at home around her kids and she needs to take care of her kids instead. And that's the source of the stress. And she's constantly relying on Kathy, who is at her wit's end because she sees a problem with CJ. Because even though we as the audience know that George has made his way into the house, and this is a sequence that I really enjoy, is that when we're introduced to all of these characters, more or less, it's when George enters the upstairs and he creeps into their property and slinks into the window. And so it's almost like a Black Christmas-like element where the killer is inside the house. There's another element that this film does that I definitely want to acknowledge. It's the countdown of days. And the countdown of days that indicate that we're in New York. Day 1, New York. Day 2, day 3. We're into Florida. And it counts down to the final day. And I love this. I think that this is such a great tension-building device. Something that I've not seen used very often. The only movie that I can even think of right now that uses it in this exact way is The Ring. And counting down to a killer's meltdown, event, is just very interesting to me, and I really dug it. Now, when CJ comes in off the street, it looks like he's been gutted. He's got blood all over himself, and you can probably tell that this is not true just because of the way that they're doing that, but his mother is in hysterics, and the kids are in hysterics, and everyone is in hysterics. And CJ says that he was stabbed by a man outside, and we saw him walking towards George, who was across the sidewalk. It's possible that that's what happened, but that's not what happened. And when the mother scolds him, and as I could see it in your eyes, and screeching at him because she was beside herself, she was so worried. His reaction, just that it's like that constant mischievous, ain't I a stinker look on his face where he's not really given very much dialogue. I think he's a kid. He's not a very good actor. But that being said, there's a lot of people in this movie who aren't the greatest actors in the world, up to and including Susan herself.
Yeah, with her yelling at the kids to go get into the television room. Go into the TV room. Go into the other room.
The room with the television.
The room with the television.
I
on one hand, yes, she could just be frazzled, and that could be verbatim. You know, you could have recorded this with your camcorder in the 80s, for sure. A parent saying this exact same thing the same way she said it. But yeah, you had pointed out before we were recording that she is an actor, and we know this. She is reading lines, and we know that. She's flubbing her lines. This we know. We can tell right here that she's flubbing her lines, and it happens a few times. I think that the director was just so blessed with the actor that played George, who is an amazing actor, and probably said everything perfectly. Even the actor that played the boyfriend,
he was good too.
My Tom Savini lookalike. Yeah, he probably just knew his lines. You know, he was just on it. And anyone else that wasn't 100% probably didn't get enough direction. For a budget of $250,000 at the time, maybe they were under some time constraints, perhaps, or maybe they were running out of film.
There's a couple of sequences in this film, particularly I'm thinking about the airport sequence where you have like these gentlemen walking to each other and they're talking and you can't hear any dialogue. And you're like, where's the ADR? I get it. You've shot this in an actual airport. So, but I was like, come on. They're all talking. Are you telling me that the dialogue that they're saying is not important? And all the way up into they get into the car, and it's not until we do a complete scene change where we're in the vehicle far away from this place that we finally can see people speaking in a normal indoor voice. And come on, guys. Even the sequences where Susan is talking to Kathy, Susan is talking to her boyfriend, Susan is talking to her children. Man, does she bring down those scenes, and you can tell. But again, in a weird way, it works for like a frazzled mom. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, it does just seem like she doesn't really know her lines, and consequently, or at the same time, the director is not just cutting out the bad takes.
Yes, with that television room, TV room flub, they could have, quite honestly, and I am Monday morning quarterbacking here, where you would cut out the line that doesn't work, punch in a little bit for the line so it doesn't look like you've made a cut, and then pull the camera back out and continue the scene. You could eliminate that without the audience noticing that you've cut out that line. And it would have worked, and it would have upped the tension in that scene, actually, because she's screaming at children, you know. They could have done a lot of stuff. They could have cut to a shot of just CJ looking, aren't I a stinker, as you put it, his little Dennis the Menace face or whatever. They could have just cut to that, because it no doubt have tons of footage of that. But I don't know, maybe their editor just wasn't on it. Maybe they had time constraints, which is what I'm suspecting. And this actress, if you put her up against a strong actor, or even the kids, it is not as noticeable how poor her delivery is. But you put her up against an even worse actor, and what you get is the real estate office scene. My favorite scene of the whole film. Because taken out of context, it is just bad acting 101. And it is, again, an example of this writer, director, whoever doesn't know how computers work. They don't know how real estate works either, because it's like, hello, I would like to sell my house. Yes, please. I see that you are here to sell your house. It is a wonderful house. I think we will sell it very well. What we'll need is pictures like those. See those? Yes, I see those. Those are pictures. Ha ha. I will take some of my house and I will give it to you to sell. Okay, thank you. Bye now.
Wow. Yeah, no.
That's that scene in a nutshell.
I really don't want our listeners to get too distracted or bummed out by the fact that we have a lot of complaints. Another really bad acting scene that we'll get to is the police investigator talking to CJ in one of the most heinous, this is not how police operate in any jurisdiction, in any country. I don't care if like, this is how we do it in Italy. No, it's not. No, it's not. That's not how anyone does this.
The psychologist is the same too, and it doesn't help that his voice is so high pitched that every time he speaks, it sounds remarkably like a woman. But then when he screams and yells, he sounds like something altogether foreign. He barely sounds human, and it's great. It's great. So yeah, it is. It has its quirks. It's not campy. It doesn't take you out of it. It's absurd for sure. The way that these people behave and the bad acting moments are just they're intriguing and they're interesting to watch. So yeah, don't let it bum you out if you're planning on watching this and thinking, if you're second guessing it, nah, go right ahead because it's absurd.
Lydia, here's the thing. It's not against the law to have bad dreams. It's not against the law to be mentally ill. Are you suffering from schizophrenia? We got pills for that. Don't you worry about it. You're probably more likely a danger to yourself than other people. And if you're medicated, you're probably perfectly fine. These are the realities of having these types of mental illnesses. Murderous dream ideations and stuff like that. All of this can be managed. However, it is actually against the law to follow women home and slit their throat. So all of George's fantasies have now become reality. And he follows young Barbara home and cuts her throat. Great throat slitting scene. Again, this film is not going to shy away from the gore. Even sequences where I'm thinking, oof, I'm surprised they didn't cut away. You're going to look at it. And now he's in a position where he is almost in a come down state, laying in like mostly naked, just in his underwear. He's calling his therapist. He's in serious trouble because he let his dark impulses take over him and he is finally killed again.
I wonder how much killing had gone on beforehand. Later on, we'll find that he seemed to have a fairly balanced life, I suppose. He must have. But what did he do to land him in not only psychiatric care, but psychiatric care where he was given experimental drugs and being groomed to be some sort of super soldier? I'm not really sure what MK Ultra bullshit they were trying to inject in there, but he must have done something so heinous and terrible to land him in this sort of care, to have them also think that he's a killing machine of some sort or something. So they don't really talk about that anything else he's done, but he seems to have a steady hand when he does commit this murder. And it is just a really tense and glorious scene. It's very sad when he makes his phone call. It's very sad when he has a seizure afterward. And I really like the way that this actor and the way they've portrayed these terrible grand mal seizures. They've done a very, very, very good job of it.
When he's killing this woman, he has this far away look on his face. He's not looking at her. He's looking away. He looks like he's almost in tears. It's good stuff, man. It's just good stuff. And that's when these sequences come alive. And I really dig this movie. And it's why I wanted to bring it to the show, frankly, because I think that the parts of the film that are so good are just so compelling and well done. And then the sillier parts are a little funny. What do you want to say about old Kathy? She does not like CJ, and the money that she is getting for babysitting can't be all that great, because she is ready to walk out of this place. Every time, Lydia, she looks after these little brats, feels like she's getting stalked. She's going outside. She's looking around. She's getting phone calls, and she doesn't know what the hell is going on. But of course, it always seems to come down to old CJ. He's always playing a prank, always messing around with her. You know, nana nana boo boo, stick your head in doo doo, and all the great rhymes that he has. He's got, like you said, like that apparatus. What do you want to call it? Like what? Like it's like a man-sized dummy that he can fit inside that has light up eyes. I don't know where he got this.
I know it probably costs $1 zillion too. I'm not sure what it is, but that dummy has the mask on. And the best I could find after watching this film is Commander Zod from Superman 2. And that's who he sort of looks like. And he also has light up eyes in the comics. But I'm not a comic aficionado. Did you have any idea of who this mask is supposed to be?
No, he doesn't really look like Zod to me. But that character's been interpreted a lot of different ways. But like generally speaking, he's got like, you know, black hair and the penciled mustache and all that kind of shit. So it's for the production of the movie, I would imagine they just picked it up from any old mask store, costume shop, or wherever. So it could have been anything. And Susan's desperation to get Kathy back to be the babysitter, and like, I've never really seen anything like it in a film, because again, Susan, it's not like she's a high stakes real estate agent. She's just a single mom, and we're not really sure about her life outside of the fact that she just wants to like party and have sex with her boyfriend and go on his boat. And she's always just calling her kids from the bar. Like I don't, and serving them dinner is like throwing them a burnt burger patty each while they like fight over the food like wild animals. Like there's no condiments. Like I just don't get why you need a baby. Stay home and look after your kids.
Oh, but she's so young, and it's Florida, and her boyfriend has a boat, and they have like, he's going to get some job or something, so they have to go to this dinner party real bad. Like, yeah, it is sad. That's part of why I wanted to see some sort of dissection of her as a mother, but I didn't get what I wished for. And these kids didn't get condiments either. But I mean, they are kind of out of control kids. In this day and age, I think that she would have been able to get some sort of assistance mentally for CJ, because he's really the weak link here. He's who's making this house so chaotic. The sisters seem to be pretty okay left to their own devices. She'd probably have a little more time and bandwidth to parent properly if it was just the two girls. But oh well, she happened to have this insane son or whatever, who is actually has police eyes on him for murder at this point in the film because of his pranky nature. I guess he had his friends meet up with him after, the same friend who seems to be his connection for prank goods, because he's also got a splicing kit so he can call his own phone line from another line in the house, provided by this kid friend of his. And the same kid friend agrees to meet him at this abandoned house, which they kick around in. I wish they spent a little more time in this abandoned house and like just explain. Maybe all the neighborhood kids go there all the time, but CJ goes there to meet up with his friend to what, I don't know, kick rocks, smash glass. I don't know what they're gonna do, but CJ like leaves him alone to go and like throw sticks in the alleyway or something.
I fucking love this sequence. So
it is great. I really enjoyed this abandoned house as well.
So this abandoned house sequence happens. First thing, we need a girl in danger. And that's where young Candy comes in here. Not to be confused with Kathy. These women look remarkably similar, but Candy has a headband. And that's how you can tell her apart. But when Candy is murdered, interestingly enough, they cut away from that kill. They'll show you the aftermath, but it's very interesting to me that they didn't actually show the kill itself. and later she's covered in rats and everything like that. It's okay. I kind of, if you're going to have a body covered in rats, I need some chewy. I need some, to have the eye chewed out or something, just to like, otherwise it just looks like you have some pet rats that you made dirty and just put on this actress who's trying to stay very still with her eyes open. But Tony is there. And this is, I was trying to, okay, I was like, okay, Wes, you're 10 years old. And I'm trying to think about my very best friend when I was 10 years old. His name was Ryan Wilkie. And shout out to Ryan Wilkie if you're listening to the show. And I know you are. I don't know. But so we used to pal around and go through the woods and go exploring just like little kids do. And I was trying to imagine if I brought my friend Ryan to a spooky, broken down, dilapidated house, would I just stand in the doorway and call to him while he's exploring it, not go inside myself, and then, without saying goodbye, clearly, I'm just going to go home. And then, like, hours later, when it's nighttime, the police are going to show up. And then it seems as though somehow the police know that, because they asked around, Lydia. They asked the other kids. And what happens? The aftermath of this scene is so fucking baffling for two primary reasons. One, a cop starts questioning a potential witness in the middle of a crowded area with other police officers, civilians, and everything, while simultaneously showing him the body of his dead friend and haphazardly like, so you know what happened here? Were you here? Talked to your friends, said that you guys were playing here. Did you kill Tony? Did you kill Tony? And then as the most guilty person in the world who definitely didn't kill Tony, but is making no effort to sound like he didn't kill Tony, he takes a good 15 seconds to answer. And he's like, I didn't kill him. I didn't kill him. That's not convincing. And then later on, the police officers, the detective or whoever he is just like, oh, okay, well, I don't think we're going to get anything. We should go. Like, we're not going to get anything out of him here. Like, no, you're not going to get anything out of him here. This is not how police investigations work, you fucking dipshit. Who the fuck wrote this scene? Like, you want to know something? It would have been less expensive to just shoot this scene in a private room where, I don't know, police officers conduct interviews with potential witnesses to crimes. And particularly if you think this is a suspect, you're not going to ask him questions while making him look at he's a kid. He's a child. Like, and that's not even the craziest thing about this is not even that that sequence happened the way that it did. It's that in the next scene that we see CJ, he's kind of into it. He's like, they think I killed somebody. And nobody is concerned about this. Like his mother, nobody. It's just like, yeah. I guess our son is under investigation for murder.
The fact that the mother drove him there to this police scene at night to go and see his dead friend and be questioned by police is absurd. The whole thing. She doesn't even say a word, too, throughout the whole thing, because if any cop was questioning any 9-year-old boy, then the mother would be stepping in no matter what sort of parent you are. But I guess this is just her style. Let her kid fend for himself. And then she gets him in the car and doesn't say another word. The next day he's kicked out of school. And I guess the whole town is full of these people who just have free-range children because he makes his way home alone during the day, lets himself in, and proclaims to nobody, because the house is empty-ish, that, well, they sent me home from school because everyone thinks I killed Tony. This is a sort of absurdity where it's not bad. It doesn't, like, it does sort of bring the film down to a certain extent, but this whole CJ stuff is just, it is absurd. It's absolutely absurd because no one behaves like this. But yeah, it does make for some very unique horror film watching.
So let me ask you this, Liz. Let's say you're a babysitter, okay? I know you've done some babysitting in your time, even some camp counseling in your time. You've had a lot of slasher trope, final girl type jobs in your youth.
I certainly have. I certainly have.
But let me ask you this. If you walked off of a job because you think the kid that you're looking after is a little psycho who is constantly causing problems and literally scaring you, and now the town is abuzz of the fact that he potentially has killed his little boy best friend Tony, do you think someone spotting you $20 is gonna get you back in that house by yourself with him?
Usually no, but it is just for 2 hours. Just 2 hours. It's just 2 hours. I've been in a position where someone's begging me to babysit, so to speak. Not because their kid is a psycho and I don't want to, but usually because it's either already late or I have other plans or I just don't feel like it or I don't need the money. I guess that also helps. You know, when you need the money, you'll babysit. But it's just 2 hours, Wes.
I love this aspect of this film where this woman, Kathy, not only does she seem smarter than this because she sees that there's something wrong with this kid really before anybody else does, but based off his behavior, but she makes such a poor decision and then compounds it by getting down to fuck toot sweet. I've never seen anything like this. She didn't seem like this type of a character. She didn't seem like, oh yeah, like let's fuck in the middle of the living room just because this dude showed up. She literally was a fairly, what I thought was a studious babysitter. She was watching television and the kids, making sure that things were okay. But when she thought something was wrong, when she thought there was a prowler or somebody on the property, she went and she investigated. She was manning the phones. She was being responsible. She was the guardian of this household. All of a sudden, this fucking dude shows up out of nowhere who we don't really know, except don't worry because her sister told her that told him that she was going to be there. She is like pulling this guy's pants off. She wants to fuck yesterday.
And she's only babysitting for 2 hours, I might remind everybody. So she's been there long enough to put the kids to bed. CJ's not fully asleep. He's definitely listening to everything going on or whatever. And yeah, they're just going to bang as soon as possible. And this mumbly-mouthed blonde Barney Rubble, like I have no idea who this person is. So it's just a weird scene. But it does set up for some really good rampaging because we know somebody who is not down to fuck. We know somebody who is absolutely against it and will probably cut your head off if he's put in the right position and the right, kind of trigger, which this is that right kind of trigger. George is in the house because he's spent a few times coming in and out, sneaking, from being outside of the kid's bedroom and the first time that he's in the house to being upstairs and making prank phone calls from within the house. Again, he's there.
He is within the house, and an earlier point in which CJ had come home and announced that he's under investigation for murder, which he says gleefully, like, I'm a bad little boy. Who is there but George? And he is desperately trying to both hide from this kid and take his medicine. He's trying to, because he is this rage is overtaking him, and he knows that he is teetering on the edge of completely losing control. And he doesn't want to. And that's when he calls The calls are coming from inside the house. And he tells CJ to get out of the house, like leave, get out, because he doesn't want to hurt him. And again, really great stuff. This rampage sequence is pretty great. We have a good garroting, so we're done with our Barney Rubble just as soon as he shows up, basically. And then it's Kathy's turn, and she is brutalized by it's a little hammer.
Yeah, almost like a rock hammer or something. It's got a very dangerous claw on the end, like an ice pick almost. I thought it was a rock hammer, but I'm not exactly sure exactly what sort of hammer it is. But it's an all-metal hammer that can tear through wooden doors, basically. It's a relentless chase and a relentless bludgeoning of this door, and it's terrifying. I really like the way that they film this. It's not quite Jack Shining axe level of door damage, but it is pretty intense.
It really is. Him donning the Halloween mask is what gives him the upper hand to, even though he's already killed Kathy's boyfriend, she doesn't know this because she just thinks that it's, again, CJ. And she's like, I'm going to call your mother. And when she reaches for the phone, that's when apparently it's a rock pick is what it is.
Okay. Like a rock hammer. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And gets it right through the hand. Gloriously gory, this sequence, this kill. He's been sort of working up the nerve to kill him. And then he turns his sights. His blood rage is now turning the sights on the kids, and he begins to stalk CJ through the house. But I bet you didn't know this, Lids. This little fucking kid is armed to the teeth.
As soon as he goes into his mother's room, I thought that he was looking for a gun. That's just the look of determination. He's like, under the pillows, under the mattress, where is this? And he's looking for something, and I just knew that's what he was going to come up with. The way it's filmed is very good because it lets you feel like you know something. It feels like you've got it figured out because you've seen this one little scene and you figured out that he's looking for a gun. And when he holds it up, it's like, damn, that's a hand cannon. This kid knows how to shoot. It's crazy. He is their man of the house. He's already had this talk from his mother's easy breezy boyfriend about, someday you're going to have to wear the pants in the family. And here he is, wearing them with a gun in his hand. And he blasts George a couple times. And you keep expecting like it's going to go in his face, right? He's going to shoot him in the head. But he doesn't. And there's a few chances that he could have done that. But he ends up giving him some like pretty grievous body wounds. All the while, George is still wearing this very creepy mask that had once belonged to CJ. So it's just a very poetic scene. CJ looks very serious and very determined on protecting his sisters.
He is protecting his two sisters. He's getting them out of the house and then goes back in. Here's an interesting fact if you go back and watch this movie. He doesn't miss once. He nails George every single time. While George is kind of pathetically like, you maybe think CJ is in danger for about 30 to 45 seconds, to the point in which now George is just getting shot 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. And it is a horror movie. And so he is going to get up like he's Jason Voorhees, but he is haggard. And he's like, you don't understand. Again, this dialogue is great that George delivers. I really like it. It's very sad. And oh shit, he's back up again. And CJ's out of bullets. Don't worry. He's got a rifle and he's just as good with the rifle. Looking at this motherfucker like John Rambo, just boom. I was like, what the fuck?
Yep.
I need you guys to understand, this is a small kid. It is
He
not
is
like
a tiny little wiener kid, a little Dennis the Menace. Where he learned to shoot, I have no idea.
and how he can. Okay, he was holding that handgun that looked like a fucking Magnum with two hands. I've fired guns that size before, and even for someone my size, and gang, if you don't know, I'm a big man. Even for my size, that type of recoil is extremely hard to contend with. A kid, but fuck all that. The rifle that he is not even holding really properly, and he's got this look of grim death on his face, and he fires that twice, doesn't even move. He was born to kill. He will not be denied. This guy is not Dennis the Menace. He's Dennis Destroyer of Worlds.
He is. He absolutely is. And had they not played the very end scene with CJ for almost laughs, it would have really sat very uncomfortably with us, because we would be like, oh shit, this kid is gonna get out. This kid is gonna go on a rampage. This kid is gonna be hell on wheels. And he's probably gonna be, but we go back to almost a Dennis the Menace joke, a little stinker kind of joke. I like that you call them little stink. I had a little stinker, because that's what we get, a little rascals kind of level of attitude from him later. But in this scene, yeah, he looks full of grim vengeance, and it is terrible.
We get the full bore of this flashback, this memory, during the sad death of George Tatum. We see a little ventriloquist dummy boy in a little bow tie going upstairs, and this sequence we've sort of danced around. What's happening is his father has hired somebody, or is dating somebody or something, who is into the BDSM. The dad is. And so he's getting tied up, and she's sitting on top of him, and she's slapping him around to the point in which blood comes out his nose. This is all consensual. This is what...
Yeah, he's saying, this is great. This is good. Keep it up.
And young George does not comprehend what he's looking at, or doesn't like what he's comprehending. And he goes and gets an axe and decapitates this woman in 2 swings. And while his father is still tied to the bed, and young George stands over him, and you'd think, oh, he was trying to protect his father because he thinks his father was in danger. He was tied up and he was getting beaten up by this woman. I'll save you, Dad. Not exactly. It seems as though just the entire sex act enraged him, and he knew that his father was into it, because he buries that fucking axe, and it is graphic. They do not pull away from this decapitation or burying this axe in this guy's head.
Yeah, they do a really, really good job with the effects. And I wonder here, because it's not explicitly noted, is this his mother? Because that would explain him killing the father. If it's like, you drove my mom to doing this sex act. So I wonder, because again, it's kind of vague, as vague as it is as to whether George has been granted an apartment and has escaped, quote unquote, or just walked away. Like, it's not really made clear. This isn't made clear at all either. But it's nice to see this sequence, and this is part of that trick of showing flashbacks and bits and pieces. When you finally get to see the whole scene play out from beginning to end, you feel like that sense of satisfaction, because we've seen snippets of this. We've seen this decapitated, torn up body of a woman on a bed numerous times. We've seen reactions of the fathers numerous times. We've seen his face and him covered in blood numerous times. And here we have some juxtaposition between the look of young CJ and this young blonde ventriloquist dummy who, on his way up to kill his mom, like this woman and his father, proclaims, "I'm home from work." And it's like, from doing what exactly?
I don't know, being a puppet on the boardwalk, I guess. I like your theory that it's his mother, because I have to admit, I never once thought that was the case. I always thought that this was either just a sex worker, or that this was a girlfriend, or a mistress, something like that. But no, the mother, I even like that a lot more, because it seems so much more deeply personal. Now, when they have this sequence, they are now lingering on this young boy who has now become this murderous man. The police are there. The bodies are being covered up. The mother is in her element, in complete hysterics, screeching, because she knows the man that has caused all of this mayhem. It is none other than her very own husband and father of her children, who walked out on them right after CJ was born. He had returned to his home and returned to his family to kill them.
It's not a wonder that CJ is the only person that had seen him and didn't recognize him, because if anyone else would have, they would have. Of course, the girls are old enough that they would have recognized their father. It's just sort of delicious in that way, that the way that this is played out. You also get a better idea of like why this young boy and CJ are juxtaposed as often as they are during these flashbacks, and especially near this end scene, and where maybe this ruthlessness of CJ comes from.
They don't try to be subtle about what they're implying, that Kathy was right. There's something wrong with this boy. And even though he didn't kill Tony, and even though he wasn't responsible for all of this carnage, his pranks and his odd behavior, antisocial behavior, is the early signs that he is a burgeoning killer. And how he killed his own father so handily, history repeating itself. A young boy murdering his father, who was effectively helpless in the hands of a superior killer. He has gotten an upgrade. He now has guns. And the film ends with a little boy in the back of a car covered in blood and a cheeky little wink to the camera, like he's Superman, letting us know that he sees us too before he flies off. Just speaking of Zod, before he flies off over the sunrise. It's Christopher Reeve winking at us before the credits roll. It's the same thing. And that's a wrap on Nightmares.
I enjoyed it very, very much, except for that stinking wink, because that ruined it. I was like, oh, wow, this is a really poignant ending. Sort of see it coming, sure, to a certain extent and all that. But like, why did they throw that in there to make it even more, prankstery? Oh my gosh. But yeah, really enjoyable.
I agree totally. The wink is very stupid. Not only is it very cliche in a way that I don't like, I don't mind formula, but I abhor cliches. And it just, it seemed like something that was thought of on the fucking day. It seems like, hey, why don't we do one where you just give a cheeky little wink to the camera, letting the audience know, that's right, I'm the killer next, idiots. Like, I don't see what the point of doing that was, and it absolutely, I agree, sucks all of the poignancy and tension out of that ending sequence. Just let the audience draw their own conclusions. You don't need the wink. It's out of a different genre of film. Like, you're like a cartoon character now, and I don't buy it. But I think it's almost completely within keeping with this film, because every time this film shows you greatness, they gotta just sprinkle a little shitty on it, just to remind you perhaps why this film got lost to time a little bit.
Two things. Apparently in the Wikipedia, they refer to the girl that the father's having sex with as some woman, another woman, or whatever. So I don't know if it is the mom. I really want it to be, because then his wife would look curiously a lot like the woman in that death scene. So it would be like he's married his mother. And that's why he's run away, because he's afraid of what he's going to do, right? So, yeah, that would work so well. And the other thing is, if you were Tom Savini and this happened to you, where you consulted one day on a movie and it turns out they blow it out of proportion and suddenly you are the super special effects supervisor and you did all the effects or whatever, it's fine. They look good. Aside from his little thing where they didn't add enough green to the blood and on the white sheets or whatever, like, it's good, it's gory, it's a great film, it's a really good film. Wouldn't you just be like, yeah, totes, I totally worked on that film?
There is an aspect to this that I think if I were to put myself in his position, one, if you very much in your soul felt like it was factually untrue. Second, and the more complicated aspect of this, is the fact that Les Lorraine took their own life before this film was released. And so the person who perhaps he believed deserved more credit and couldn't advocate for themselves anymore, and whose name was blown up all over the film instead of them, perhaps he felt even more compelled to dig his heels in to make sure that Les Lorraine got their credit. That's the only thing that I can think of.
What's odd is that I think that all of this special effects stuff is for overshadowing the fact that Cleve Hall was on this, and Chris pointed it out because when we were watching the credits, specifically to see more Tom Savini roll by, he was a really great special effects artist, still working, who worked on The Reanimator, Camp Dread, all sorts of really cool stuff. So, yeah, he was the first assistant to all of this. So, totally overshadowed. Really great work that was totally overshadowed by this back and forth rumor about Tom Savini.
Yeah, and I think that the controversy itself, while fun to talk about, there's so much to talk about this film. The performances, great and bad, the special effects, which are incredible, by a team of people just trying to do their best with what they had. And it is a shame. I do wish that this film was just more well-known beyond its controversy. But at the same time, without me knowing about its controversy, I never would have looked it up in the first place all those years ago. So there's something to be said for no such thing as bad press.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right.
So what do we got next for them?
Coming up next, we have a bit of a Wes pick because I wanted to do something campy, not campy like this film had its campy moments, but out in the forest, some sort of slasher that has to do with the woods. We're getting into springtime here. It's going to be time for hiking pretty soon after the solar eclipse, which we're all geared up for. So I wanted to see something like that and stay with an older film. So we've chosen The Forest from 1983, where we get to romp around the majestic sequoias and watch a bunch of people get murdered, hopefully.
Well, you will. And don't you worry, don't you fret, because there's some camp in this film for sure.
From what I understand, it is pretty campy. But hey, I am here for it.
And I am Wes Knipe.
And I'm Typical Lydia, and here for it.
And you've been listening to Dead Air. If you like this show, you can find more episodes and other content on splatterpictures.net, Spotify, or wherever you download podcasts. We also upload all episodes to YouTube now, if you'd prefer to listen that way. You can find us across social media like Instagram, X, and TikTok, and the show is edited by Lydia Peaver and hosted by Lydia Peaver and me, Wes Knipe. We'll see you next time.